Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Earth Science Applications Week 2021 afternoon symposium session. This will be focusing on innovation and professional development, and there's a concurrent session going on focusing on Earth observation applications. So yeah, today's events will focus on professional development and innovation within the realm of NASA applied sciences and more broadly Earth science and the effects on society and whatnot. So before we start off talking about the various events that are happening in this track of the symposium today, I just wanted to briefly go over some logistics and meeting etiquette for virtual meetings. So unless you are having a discussion or asking a question, please keep yourself muted and keep your video off. The reason for this is, that if we have too many videos going at the same time, it can eat up on the bandwidth and cause connection issues for certain people. Additionally, we just want everyone muted so that no one's accidentally talking over any of the presenters. So if you have questions for a speaker, and this applies to the career panel and the rest of the events, please either write them in the chat or just scribble them down on your side and save them for the Q&A sessions, which will happen at the end of each event. So you can either post questions in the chat and the speakers will answer them there, or verbally during Q&A sessions, or during the Q&A sessions, you can use the raise your hand function in Teams, which can be found in the bar on the top of your screen. It's a symbol that looks like a hand. Then you will be highlighted, and I, the MC, will call on you, at which time you can unmute, turn your video off if you'd like, and ask your question. I'd also like to note that all of these sessions will be recorded and will be made available after the conclusion of the events. So to quickly go over the events that are happening today, right now we have a career panel featuring some wonderful panelists, colleagues and friends and former developers from the NASA Develop program, and they're going to talk with us about their careers, their passions, and experiences. That will last for about an hour, and then we'll pick up to hear some workers and interns from the NASA Applied Sciences program talk about prizes and challenges to advance innovation in earth science. Following that, we'll have the NASA Capacity Building Program's Earth Observation Summer Camp for Urban Youth. And finally, at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, we'll hear from NASA Develop's Geoinformatics team as they talk about modernizing collaboration with version control. Okay, so before we get going on the career panel, I'd like to give a bit of an overview as to the structure of this event. So for the first approximately 40 minutes of the event, we're going to have a period of guided discussion. I have a list of topics which we're going to go over with the career panelists as they share, as I mentioned earlier, their careers, experiences, and passions. And then for the approximately the final 20 minutes of this hour-long event, we will open it up to the audience for questions. So as I mentioned earlier, please save your questions for then or post them in the chat, and we'll get to them once that last third of the session starts. And one last thing before we get started, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can see each other's faces more easily. We want this to be more of an open-ended discussion where everyone shares their experiences, thoughts, and ideas rather than a webinar or just a presentation. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for now. Okay, great, and we can get started. So I'm going to start off by introducing myself and then the panelists. My name is Robert Cecil Biles. Cecil is my middle name, but that's what I most go by, although it doesn't reflect that on the screen, I think. So I am a senior fellow with NASA's Develop National Program, who, if you've attended some of the other events during this week, you may know a little bit about. We are a capacity building program that conducts 10-week feasibility studies to sort of bridge the gap between NASA Earth science and society. All of our projects have real-world applications and always have an end user, a decision-making organization or group, hand off our results to so that they can incorporate that into their policy-making or decision-making capabilities. So next I'm going to go around and briefly say the name of each panelist, and then I'll throw it back to them to give a more thorough introduction of themselves, and they can discuss their employer, their job title, and what they do in their jobs. So we have Mark Coder from the City of Austin Office of Sustainability. We have Zachary Leslie from AeroTract, David Hondula from ASU, who is Arizona State University, that is, who is also a Develop Science Advisor for NASA Develop projects, and Kristen O'Shea, who works with Conservation International and is a Develop alum. Yeah, so Mark, could you please start it off? Tell us a little about yourself and about your position and employer.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that you actually pronounced my last name correctly, so thank you very much. Mark Coder, Office of Sustainability at the City of Austin, and my title is Environmental Program Manager. At the office, we do a lot of work around climate mitigation and climate adaptation. My focus is on climate adaptation. How do we as a city prepare for and bounce back stronger from events, both from our assets and operations, but also our community? So yeah, I, on a day-to-day, just work with community members and staff on how to think about climate.
Fantastic, thank you. Next, could we please hear from Zachary?
Hi guys, thanks for having me. My name is Zachary Leslie. I'm a GIS specialist and software developer for AeroTract out of Albany, Oregon. We're a drone service, so we work with Lidar, thermal, multispectral, and mostly visual data. And I've been working a lot more on the machine learning side of things rather than GIS stuff. So we'll have a remote pilot to go out, take a whole bunch of photos. We put those into an orthomosaic, and then I take that orthomosaic and do object detection. So whether it be like first year trees, water, stuff like that.
Thank you. Dave, please tell us a little bit about yourself next.
Hey everyone, good morning from Arizona. Dave Hondula here. I'm a faculty member in the School of Geographical Sciences and Urban Planning at ASU, and my workload is probably close to what you imagine for an academic faculty member. I teach courses in weather and climate and statistics. I'm involved in mentoring graduate students. A lot of our research focuses on extreme heat and public health. And I'm very fortunate to be able to serve in the science advisor capacity for the Develop program. I think our node leader, Ryan, is on the call. And by coincidence, or maybe not, we had the chance to partner with Mark and his team on a recent project. And I've really enjoyed the partnership that the Develop program facilitates between young scholars, local government, and other organizations. It really adds a nice layer onto my portfolio as an academic researcher.
Awesome, thank you. And last but not least, Kristen, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Definitely, thanks, Cecil. So my name is Kristen O'Shea, and I'm a geospatial coordinator for Conservation International. And while I work remotely from Colorado, I work with teams all over the world on different conservation projects, looking at deforestation, land degradation, supply chains, and I do a mix of both geospatial analysis, but then also modeling and using remote sensing data, a lot of it from NASA also. Thanks.
Great, thank you. So with this career panel, what we really wanted the audience to get out of it is to just to have them gain insight into different careers and sectors in earth science, and what kind of opportunities are out there, and also, of course, to hear the shared experience of people working in those kind of fields, because nothing really gets you to learn more about something than to have a sit-down chat with someone who is an expert in that field or is knowledgeable about that sort of position. So you may have noticed that we have people from most, I guess, main sectors found in the field of earth science. Mark works with government. Zachary works with a for-profit organization. Kristen works with a nonprofit, and David works in academia. So I guess in that case, my first question is a more broad and icebreaker type of question, which is what led you to your position? How did you end up working for your employer? And was that the career you envisioned, or was it something that more of fell into your lap? And anyone can answer any of these questions I ask.
I guess I'll step in since nobody is unmuting your mics. After my term at Develop, I actually started applying for jobs, and I applied for pretty much everything that I possibly could, even all over the country. And I just kept hearing, oh, you don't have enough experience, we can't hire you. And I was getting really annoyed with that because, how do I get experience without actually getting a job? So it's just in this roundabout loop. And one of my colleagues had a roommate who was another colleague of mine, and he said, hey, he just started up his own drone business. He's looking for somebody, that has GIS experience. Do you want me to introduce you? And I was like, yeah, I'd love to, sit down and chat with them. And that's kind of how I just kind of fell into it.
I mean, I guess I'll go next. I worry about how much do you want to hear, because I mean, I can go back to when I was 7 and I wanted to be either an FBI agent or a waiter. I wasn't sure. I think similar to others, you have to be open to new ideas, because I had a path to go down to only work on architecture and planning. And when the economy sort of changed in 2008, my wife and I decided to move to Austin, and I didn't really have the networks to get a job. So I got a job with the city, sort of like just as a temporary position. But it turned out it was the climate plan, which I knew nothing about climate change. And I sort of took job. I might have fibbed a little, I didn't fib on my resume, but I might have fibbed a little bit in the interview, got the job. And then the city hired on a chief sustainability officer. So we became the Office of Sustainability. Nobody was looking at climate or climate adaptation. So I was like, if nobody else is doing it, I'll just try. And that was 10 years ago, and I'm still in the same position doing it now. So part of it is just kind of luck, but also being open to change and seeing what's out there. It's a little bit scary sometimes, but it's fun.
I can hop in next. What led me to the position at Conservation International was actually a project I did while I was at NASA Develop, and got the awesome opportunity to continue it and publish it along with the science advisors at the Colorado node. And it was the first time that I understood the real power of GIS and remote sensing to make positive change in monitoring and managing just important species, or just helping people understand what the physical world looks like. So we published a paper on wild rice, and that had a lot of conservation impact, and it kind of led me to start looking in careers that way. And I just kind of felt like, okay, here's the next jump. I kind of feel like I have to do something, and made that connection.
I'll just briefly echo a couple of things we heard, particularly from Mark. I like the comments about remaining flexible and luck being a factor. Mark, I'm curious if if your current job is like halfway between waiter and FBI agent. That is an interesting path that you chose. But yeah, I mean, as an undergraduate student, I didn't really know what life as an academic was like. So there's no way, I mean, to answer your original question, so like there's no way that could have been the plan, because I didn't even know what it was like, and had the opportunity to stick around for graduate school and found myself mentoring some students, and all of a sudden the whole lifestyle looked very attractive, and that kept me moving in the right direction. Then to Mark's comment about luck in particular, I think I got my first interview at ASU because the person who was interviewing me thought I worked on a different project as an undergraduate student than I did. I think that confusion got me in the door, but it's worked out well so far.
Great. Well, thanks for all that insight. Thank you. Always having to deal with something like that in the virtual setting. But yeah, thanks. So we gained a bit of insight into, how you got started in your positions, and, the directions that led you all to take on those positions. So I have a follow-up question related to all that. I know that a lot of the people in the audience are younger, aspiring career professionals who are looking to sort of get their foot more in the door in terms of working within the fields of earth and environmental science. So my next question is, what pieces of advice were most helpful to you when starting out your career? And or what advice would you give to your younger self at the start of your career?
Well, treat it as a reverse, or as a snake here. So I'll pick up where we left off. And I'm not sure this is the best advice, but just to get the conversation going, I was really lucky that my advisor for undergraduate and graduate happened to be in theater as a hobby, and really took presentation skills very seriously, right? Every performance was a stage production for us. We were thinking about positioning and body language and volume and pace. And I think being a capable presenter can pay huge dividends, right? If it just increases the chance that somebody's going to chat with us for 5 minutes after the presentation by, even just by a little bit, that I feel like that can go a really long way in opening doors. So I would think about, I mean, it's not a traditional job applicant skill of polishing a resume and being a good interviewer, but I would think effort in presentation skills can pay a lot of dividends when it comes to being a competitive applicant, especially with everything we're hearing today about the importance of being able to communicate science to the public.
I totally 100% agree with that, David. I am not actually a very good presenter in my eyes. So I actually started out in forest engineering as my degree, and then jumped into GIS kind of my junior year, because I wasn't really sure what GIS was until someone was like, "Oh, let's use drones for mapping trees," and I was like, "That sounds really cool. I want to do that." One of my professors, actually probably the hardest professor I had, told me. I asked him, I was like, "How do you know so much information?" He's just incredibly smart. And he said, it's not about knowing everything, it's about knowing where to find the information. And that really stuck to me, and will for the rest of my life. And if I was going to give advice to my younger self at the start of my career, it would be to, continue trying, and, never just, it's okay to fail. Like, kind of how Thomas Edison said, I have not failed. I have, found 10,000 ways, a light bulb won't work. And that's kind of what it's about. I mean, you just keep trying. I run into problems, day after day, where I spend 4 hours literally, like, how to use Python to open up a data frame, something very simple, kind of more on my end of things. And it was just simply open. Pretty much all I had to write is open, and then hit enter, and I just can't find it. But the more I try, eventually I will succeed.
I think kind of building off of that, kind of the perseverance, but also perspective. And kind of, it's really hard when you're first out. You feel like you have to know everything. But I remember my master's advisor said, "Why would you know how to do something as good as me when I started before you were born?" And that just kind of hit with me. It's like, yeah, I'm not supposed to be the best writer yet. And then that allowed me to change my perspective when it came to writing, which is something I always felt kind of self-conscious about. And I looked for more opportunities and more volunteered to start writing and collaborative things, because that perspective shift allowed me to be like, okay, maybe I'm not the best, but that's not where I'm supposed to be yet. And I'm not going to get better unless I put myself out there. So I think that was the biggest change for me.
So what advice was given to me early on that really stuck with me? When I first started, I started with a handful of people who are also first starting. And there's a lot of things you just don't know when you work in a new office. So we got into this habit of constantly asking the boss questions. And after a while, the boss was like, don't ask me a question unless you give me an answer. So for example, hey, here's a question. Should I do A, B, or C? And then once we got in the habit of doing that, we automatically realized we can make our own decisions. We can figure things out ourselves. And as you know, mundane as that sounds, that is a huge piece toward becoming a better project manager, is sort of understanding what the question is and how would you answer it rather than sort of falling back to answer the question. And what advice would I give myself? This sort of touches on the question about soft skills that came up in the chat. I wish I didn't commiserate so much in my first couple of years, or my first decade, actually. You realize when you start managing that office morale is so important. It only takes one person to kill it. And there's a tendency to do commiseration, like to start, talking bad about other people. It's human nature. I really wish I didn't do that so much and kept it positive. I think it would have been better for my mental health and the mental health and the team as a general overall.
Wow, those were all awesome, awesome answers. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, something interesting I noticed about that question was that you all gave pretty different answers, which is really cool to hear. We love to hear the variety. So as my next question, I'm just wondering, for each of you, who or what had the biggest influence on your career path and the choices that led you to where you are now?
I'll take this one first again, I guess. So my term at Develop, I met another person, and he actually wasn't on my team, but I did room with him. And I found him incredibly smart, and I looked up to him, and he's kind of been my mentor, and he introduced me to the, kind of the Python automating world to me. And I was like, that's really cool. I want to be able to take GIS data and automate it rather than, having to open up QGIS every time, okay, let's make a new shapefile, and, let's put some attributes in. I wanted to be able to just jump into Python and, just code it down real fast and be able to automate that. So as soon as I wanted another shapefile, all I had to do was, press a button rather than going through the, rigorous process of all that. So since he, introduced me to that, I just, I've been so thankful for
that. I would say the who doesn't exist for me, because every time I meet the person that I wanted to be, I realize that they have skills I don't have. And I think part of growing yourself professionally is realizing what you're not good at. Like some people are really good at technical things, some people are really good at big thinking, and it's rare that you have the person who can do both, even though everybody thinks they can. It's probably not true. So the person I've always wanted to be was always like in the horizon, in the future. And I had this vision of this person, but then when I met that person in real life, I realized it wasn't them. So it's always striving to be that better person as that person. And then the second question, what was the second? Was there a second question?
No, not for this one. It was just who or what had the biggest influence.
Oh, and then what? The what is money. I mean, most of people come out with, debt, or, they're young and they want to buy a house. Like the money is always sort of in the background. And I think it's something that you always have to take into consideration, like getting that first job. Where is it going to be? How are you going to live? What lifestyle can you actually afford? And that's always in the background. but that's also part of the conversation. So there's always this balance between risk and security, right? Do you go with a city job, which is more secure but less money, or do you go with a private job, which is more money but less secure? And I think that's always a balance that most people have to make themselves.
I can hop in. So for the who, I think mentorship is really important. You'll have different mentors over time. Some you're a lot closer to, some you're not, but they really can provide a new perspective. And I think the mentors I had, especially through NASA Develop with Tim Mayer and Dr. Tony Forrester, were huge because they really helped me understand what it means to be a scientist and what kind of scientist I want to be. And I really appreciated kind of all of the straightforward honesty and look at how things really are moving forward is really helpful. And then I would say the what is just having a support system that believed in me and then allowed me to follow what I was interested in. That's really valuable also.
I would echo the mentoring comment, and to not be redundant, I will go in a totally different direction and say sort of like a mentoring / motivational image that's been in my mind for the past 2 years. Is that of Virginia's basketball coach. I'm a bit of a sports fan, went to school in Virginia. Virginia's men's basketball team won the national championship 2 years ago. And there's this picture of for those who aren't big sports fans, if you win the basketball national championship, there's this kind of strange ceremony where everybody goes and slowly cuts the net down off the basket. And the coach goes last and holds up the net, and it's very exciting. And there's this picture of him with just this like totally like raw, unbridled enthusiasm that they had reached the pinnacle of what it was they were trying to do. And the picture just stuck with me. And students and I talk about it all the time, like, what is that moment like for us in our position? Does it exist? And if it doesn't exist, maybe we need to reevaluate where we are. So I'm thinking about that a lot as a strange mentor is Virginia's men's basketball coach, and just that one picture.
All right, great answers again. Thanks, everybody. So my next question, I guess, is circling back to, the day-to-day in and outs of your job. And I'm wondering, for all of you, what's the most fulfilling part about your job or about your whole career in general?
Yeah, if we're gonna reverse snake it again, I'll say student mentoring and success here. The big milestones, of course, graduation, or maybe getting that paper published, or really nailing a presentation, but also, like, as I'm sure many of you appreciate, like finally getting the dang code to work after 4 days of zero progress, right? Like that's a really exciting and rewarding part of the day-to-day experience here. And that might be true with graduate students who I have a closer relationship with, or with students. I teach our intro statistics class, so of course there's a lot of like hopelessness and frustration there. But turning the corner when we can in that class is also super rewarding.
I'll jump in next. As a city employee, we typically have thankless jobs, and I think that's part of the deal.
Mark, so I appreciate your job. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that. So for me, success is, our job is to help other people reach what they hope to do, or what, to make a difference through collaboration and coordination and project management. So for me, success is when I see another group get accolades or reach their potential, knowing that I was part of that process to get there. And I think part of success is defining what you find a success. Because if my point of success was simply people giving me accolades, then I'd be pretty depressed. So, but by defining it that way helps me sort of sleep at night and say, hey, you know what, I am making a difference, and this is worthwhile work.
Awesome. I'll hop in next. So what's most fulfilling about my job? I think that it hits a lot on my values and kind of where I know I wanted to go. I care a lot about different environmental issues. So it allows me every day to work on those types of things. But then also I found a really great balance. I'm one of those people, and I'm sure there's other people on this call like that is interested in research and academics, but wasn't sure about a PhD or kind of what that would mean for me. So definitely going the route I did, working at with a research group that is at a nonprofit. I get to still perform a lot of the research that I found really interesting, but also it has the applied nature that I was more drawn to rather than maybe as much regular publishing or those types of things. So it hit on both of those.
And I'll jump in last. So the most fulfilling thing about my job is definitely problem solving. Kind of like what David said, you know, you're working on a code for 4 days and then you just finally get it to work. And it's one of the, you know, best relief I ever have. You know, when I'm at work, I'm just like, oh, thank you so much for working. Yeah, I kind of keep that one short.
Great. Thanks again, everybody. Okay, so for my next question, this is NASA Earth Science Applications Week. So I wanted to talk some about NASA Earth Science data. So everyone here has had some association with NASA Earth Science data, or has used it in previous projects and other jobs, or has used it in their current job through a partnership with NASA Develop. So I'm wondering, how did working with NASA Earth Science data change your job or tasks, or what impact did it have on you as a person, whether as a Develop alum, science advisor, end user, etc.?
I mean, I'll go first this time. So at the Office of Sustainability, we work on, like I said, climate adaptation, which include for Austin, increase in heat, drought, flood, wildfire, and now bad air quality. So when it comes to data, there's a lot of maps out there that show like heat maps in the city, but people that we talk to at the ground level have a hard time understanding those maps. I mean, it's very broad. The data is like basically showing that the airport's hot and big parking lots are hot, but doesn't really show day-to-day activities. So we were able to work with NASA group, with Develop, to sort of take that information and downscale it to the human scale in some kind of workable manner, in a way the community might be able to understand it. So it's almost like connecting data to emotions, right? And our job is to sort of make people understand that it is a physical and policy implication. Because for the city, data is really only that useful if it's tied to decision making. And our decision making is tied to what, making lives better for people in the community. So making those connections is really important. And we can only do that with sort of talking through the data, talking through sort of how you present it with the developed team. And I think for us, it was super informative and really changed the way we think about data and the way we might actually pair it with lived experience.
So I'll go next. Since I was part of that Develop team, I had no idea what I was getting in for. I had some GIS background, and that's what I thought. What I was going to use was analyzing the data. I ended up doing a lot more coding and understanding, JavaScript with Google Earth Engine than I thought I was going to. So that helped me down that automating kind of world. And then really finding that mentor that was there as well, just kind of sparked the rest. Probably going to spark the rest of my career here. Just the automation and machine learning and kind of all that stuff. Anytime I have a question, I can always just shoot them a text or an email and just like, hey, here's my 25-page code. Can you help me out with this like little tiny problem in here somewhere? So without NASA, I never would have found that. nor probably have gotten into the machine learning development side of things.
Awesome. So NASA Earth Science data, I think it really impacted the conservation sector, and it's currently a big focus where people are trying to grow a lot. You see a lot of use of Growth Engine, Microsoft Planetary Computer, and just these data sets being utilized in ways that never were before. And I think the real value was that it allows people who are looking for answers to have a connection to those answers. And it provides another way to look at their problems. And it sparks a lot of innovation in thinking, how can we use this additional data to make these decisions and inform people to make sure that nature is protected for us and these different ecological and biodiverse areas of the world can be protected, and we can provide science-based targets for different people to try to reach. So I think it's been very impactful, and I think that it will continue to be, especially with even future missions. As radar develops, that is going to be huge for different carbon and looking at biomass and deforestation. So I think it's very exciting for the sector.
Nothing more to add here. Those are great answers.
All right, great. Thanks, everybody. Well, we have a little over 20 minutes left, so I think it's a good time to switch over to any questions or discussion points from the audience. So I'm going to start off with the questions that were already put in the chat. I'll read them out loud unless they were already answered by at least a few people. And then if anyone else has any other questions in the meantime, you can either put it in the chat and I'll get to it, or you can use the raise hand function again at the top of your screen, and then we'll call on you. So I think Mark referenced this a bit in a previous answer that he gave, since this was asked in the middle of the presentation. But Brittany asks, she's curious how your abilities in soft skills have changed over time. Which soft skills have been the most frequently used or most useful as you've gotten into your current positions?
That's a really tough one, because you can go too far in one direction or too far in the other direction. Like, you have to have a certain amount of camaraderie and a certain amount of, trust and relationship with the people you work with. You don't want to overdo it and share too much. You don't want to be completely cold and just not talk to people. I mean, there has to be a balance. And part of that is just being a nice person. I mean, as simple as it is, like, generally have curiosity about the people you work with and their lives, and if they're having a bad day, talk to them about it. And I think just being human is really, really important part of working with other people. So I think the best soft skill would be just to listen.
If no one has anything else on that, I might move on to the next question. Oh, Dave, you just unmuted.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Mark. It's a more challenging question than I thought it was when you sent the notes around. I mean, maybe tying even back to a previous question. I know there are different philosophies about how one should approach this, but I think I didn't take sufficient advantage of out of office social engagement opportunities in school compared to what I feel like is a good balance now. And I think that echoes what Mark said, right? The chance to learn a little bit more about each other in different settings and so on. I now appreciate the value of that time investment much more than I did when I was a student.
I do want to add one thing, though, is this is sort of related to the social aspect of our jobs is how important a network is and building that network out. I mean, I have two friends. I'll give you an example. I have two friends one has a very small network, one has a very big network. The one with a very big network gets asked like once or twice a year to work somewhere else. Like they'll actually ask them to, hey, apply for this job. You seem great for it. The person with a small network doesn't have those opportunities because that network is not there. So become really good friends with David Handula. I mean, like, get to know the people in your field, but also get to know the people in your community. And the second piece of that is something David actually mentioned at the beginning, is the hobby aspect. It's really important to have hobbies. And I didn't realize that until, I'm like 10 or 15 years away from retiring. So now it's like, I got to look back at all those hobbies I had when I was a kid, because that's going to be my future, right? You did those hobbies because you liked it, but it's also like, it allows you to do things outside your work that pushes you in different directions and makes you think differently and builds those networks. I've gotten jobs through weird hobbies, not weird hobbies, but weird relationships I've had with people. Never thought would it land to a different job. Like, expand your social circle to different people to also expand your thinking.
Great, thanks so much. So the next question in the chat, I think, was answered in part by Kristen and Zach. This is from Ryan J, and he asks, if you didn't have the background in GIS, how would you break into your field? Some answers included Kristen saying she didn't have a GIS background until after graduate school and just start looking for a problem that you can enjoy working through to practice your skills. And Zachary said the same thing, just find something that interests you and start a project for it. And yeah, if anyone has anything else to add to that, that would be cool. But if not, we can move on to the next question too.
Yeah, I really like that answer, and I might romanticize this a little bit, but I feel like I started and failed at the learn to use GIS tutorial many times because it was some problem that was very artificial to me, and it was only when we had a very tangible goal that was related to our research, or we wanted to produce a heat island map for Philadelphia or whatever it might have been. Okay, we have an endpoint. We've never opened the software, but let's see what we can do, right? And having some sort of meaningful objective to approach that learning process, that made all the difference in the world for me. So I like that answer a lot. But at some point, right, we have to like open it and click some buttons and see what happens.
Yeah, I'm going to say something that is not advice. Similar to David, I came out of planning school and I got a job at an architecture firm because I told them I knew AutoCAD, which I didn't. And my first day, I took like one class and they learned like the very basics, but I knew very little about architecture. And within 6 months, I just like worked on it and figured it out. But you're right, like computer programs are a lot like languages. If you're not using it constantly, it doesn't really become part of what you do. You don't really learn it very well. So, to David's point, just get in there, start using it every day, and before you know it, you'll get it.
Awesome, thanks. Our next question's from Darcy Gray, and she asks, what would you recommend for early career scientists who are trying to figure out where they fit in terms of the different sectors, academic versus government versus nonprofit tracts?
I tend to tell people to start with private because I think there's a work ethic there, and when you're younger, you can work more hours and before you have kids, and then go into city work or public work. That's not a true and tried advice, but that's what I did. So that's one aspect, like start with private and then use that price to then get into public. And then the second piece to that is look for jobs slightly outside of what job you think you should have. And the reason I say that is because, I have a background in architecture and planning, and I work for a city doing climate adaptation. Is because it's a little bit connected, but a little bit outside. But once you think of it that way, it opens up more opportunities for you to think about other job opportunities.
I like the idea of chatting with folks. I mean, after and Cece, you'll be happy to hear this. After the last one of these that we had 6 months ago or a year ago, I had multiple one-on-one conversations with folks who were there just to talk in a little bit more detail about their circumstances and my circumstances and what it's like to be a professor and what I like and don't like. And yeah, I think, of course, attending these excellently organized panels, but then I wouldn't be. Dude, this goes to Haley's comment as well, right? Like, Mark's a super nice guy, and I suspect he'd love to like share more about his experience. Right? I think people generally like talking about what they're doing and what they like and don't like about it. So I wouldn't be afraid to ask as you're scouring the field of opportunities. Everybody else also nice. I just happen to know Mark a little better.
Yeah, when I was in San Francisco, I would randomly call up firms and say, hey, can I do an informational interview to learn more about your firm and what you did? I'm starting out, blah, blah, blah. And most every single one of them said, yeah, I'll talk to you for 30 minutes. Turned out to be like an hour and a half, involved some coffee, whatever. But that was a great way to sort of meet people, but also learn what opportunities are out there.
Great. So the next question in the chat was from Haley, and she was asking about suggestions or tips for how to approach potential mentors or set up that relationship because it can be a bit intimidating. I think that was answered pretty well in the comments. So for the sake of time, I'm just going to move to the next one, which is from Erica Carcelin. And she wonders, what made you decide to pursue a management role within science versus a scientific research or analyst type of role? And are there any suggestions for making the pivot into project management / coordination?
Yeah, I mean, I think my answer will be brief in that I don't know if I ever like intentionally made that decision, but I think the path to professoring is like a de facto management role, whether management in quotes, whether managing students in the classroom or students that we're mentoring. And I actually think that would be an excellent addition to the academic professional development trajectory, is some formal exposure to project management, sort of concepts, theories, practices. I feel like for most of us, it's just a process of seeing what other people are doing and trying it without very little training. So I do not have the best answer to this question, I think.
I think for me, it's a combination of your career, where you want to be, and your skills. Like, right, somebody mentioned soft skills. There are plenty of people at the city of Austin who don't manage anybody, and they do like data analysts and do that kind of work, and they're perfectly happy. And there's some people who manage, 200 people. They were also somewhat happy. I think it depends on your natural abilities. There's some people who love to manage people. There's some people who find it very, very stressful. So I think it's partly, what are you good at? Is this something that you're comfortable doing and you like doing? But also, where do you want to be in your career? Because the more people you manage, you probably make a little bit more money. I see Alexa has her hand up.
Yeah, Alexa, go ahead and ask away.
Yeah, hi, Mark and Dave. Haven't seen y'all in a little bit, but sorry I didn't type it out. I feel like this is a more winded question. I just recently graduated with my master's, and I'm going on to the job hunt. And I really struggle with answering that question that I get in interviews, which is like, where do you see yourself eventually? Because I feel like I want to do it all. There's so much ahead of me, and there's so many options. Did you guys struggle with that as well? And how do you frame something like that? For me, it's such a vague and broad question. Do you think it should be more precise, or just kind of more essentially, how can I leverage that to highlight myself in a role?
I guess I'll start off. The first thing I would say is you're allowed to change your mind throughout your career. So the answer you give there could be completely different after you've had different experiences. I think all experiences kind of build on each other and bring you in certain directions. So yeah, just keeping in mind, as long as you're speaking very genuinely and you can maybe identify a few things and maybe think about scales, what's more feasible in the next couple of years to be that goal, or if it's 10 years, I think it can be a little more flexible in going back to the things you know you want to do. I want to work with a team of scientists, or like I want to work alone and run projects. Being able to kind of identify those areas, I think, are really helpful.
Yeah, I totally agree with Kristen. My 5-year plan changes every year. And I'll also give another observation is we recently hired somebody, and the candidates with 20 years experience had a really hard time answering the question of like, tell us about a project that went well, or tell us about a project that didn't go well. The people who answered it the best were people with 2 years of experience because they knew one project and they knew it. They're like, this is what we did and it was awesome. So I think just being clear and be like, look, this is the one thing I really want to do. As Kristen mentioned, the more it's quantifiable, like I want to manage one project from start to finish, or I want to work with the team that does X, the more the people can relate to it. Because at the end of the day, that question is designed for them to sort of think about how you integrate into the team and how they could sort of help you grow to where you want to be. So you don't want to be too big. You don't want to be like, I want to run this company in 5 years. Not a good answer. But like, if you can sort of, it doesn't have to be 100% accurate. Like you're not going to get tested for it. It's more of like a sense of where you want to be going. So don't stress yourself out around it.
I like what Mark is saying here. I guess we occasionally interview people to hire them, but I think I'd be listening for these like principles and practices that that the person wanted to be involved with. And from having read a little bit of like how to succeed at interviews material, I think the employer, and for those of you who are real employers, feel free to chime in. By the way, I think this can also be a screening question for, are you using this as a stepping stone or not? And I feel like by focusing more on practices and principles, you can avoid that altogether, right? Like I really value the opportunity to work on these sorts of projects, as Mark said, or I really cherish seeing this through to completion. And that could be true in the position you're applying for and the position you're going to apply for 3 years from now, but the employer doesn't have to know that to think about it.
I think another smart thing to do is get to know the company really well. So you could always drop like what they do. Like, you had this project that was really great. I really, admire the work that you did, like build up on what they do, because it's impressive how many people apply for jobs have never looked at your website. They have no idea what you do. So it's a good opportunity to talk about that you've actually read the website and that you're interested in the firm.
Great, thank y'all.
Okay, thanks for your question, Alexa, and your answers, of course, to the panelists. So I think we'll probably have time for 1 or 2, maybe 3 more questions. I see 2 main ones in the chat, but I'm going to start with the most recently asked from Biplav Bhandari. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And they ask, any advice for a researcher from developing countries who are often struggling with getting funding?
Yeah, I mean, there's a little more context around this question that I think would be helpful. But one idea that comes to mind from an academic perspective is that it seems like there are federal funding opportunities and philanthropic funding opportunities that reward partnership between different types of countries, perhaps the types of countries you're thinking about. So there might be a joint funding for countries in the Americas, and it could give us a chance to work with countries in Central America that are not as well resourced, for example. But that's one idea, is to look for partners. But I haven't really been in your shoes in particular. I have been in your shoes in struggling with funding, but I'm based in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, the same. I've never worked on trying to get funding in another country. But I think it sort of stresses the importance of being able to tell your story and communicating it out. And I think the better you can tell your story, the easier it is for people to understand how the funding can actually be used and how it can make a difference. So the research is really important, but I think the narrative is equally, if not more important, to make a difference. And then look to, the World Bank or huge organizations or philanthropic organizations, and be able to tell that story to them and convince them. I know I'm just rambling, but I don't have a better answer.
I was just going to quickly add, also maybe leveraging different communities within your domain of research. I know for a lot of women in geospatial, you can connect, and they have women from all over the world that are doing research and asking each other questions. So looking for organizations like that to connect with. They might have a lead.
Great plug for that organization. Thanks, Kristen, and everyone else too. I think we have time for one more question, which is from Lawrence Friedel, who some of you may know as the director of NASA's Applied Sciences program. So Lawrence asks, what trends are you seeing in your organization and field? And based on these, what skills do you foresee will help people set themselves apart in coming years? Wonderful question. Thanks.
I'll be happy to kick off, and I'm sure this is true in many sectors, but the academic sector appears to be, sort of at another point of reckoning with issues around justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I've recently been near some relatively high-profile job searches here as a committee member, not competitive for them myself, and how candidates brought that topic to their portfolio, their application, was absolutely a differentiator. And we had some long conversations trying to differentiate between candidates who, told us they valued diversity and went to some diversity workshops, versus somebody who actually was a scholar of equity, right? Like that was part of their portfolio, or they have extensive coursework or a degree that is adjacent to or in those fields. And I think at least for the next couple of years, I'd want to be sure that if I'm on the job market, I want to be sure I can speak to more in my application than I value diversity in the workplace. I think I need to have some type of experience to be competitive and really speak to a little bit of history, of context. It seems like that's going to be a major asset for applicants in at least the short to medium term. And sorry, I'm putting this like harsh, sort of blocky take on what is, of course, a very deep and difficult conversation.
Just to quickly summarize too, between my answers and Zach's. So in the profit and nonprofit, things are just moving so fast. Technology is growing, everything's changing, the expectations are changing. So we both said both perseverance and then respectful fearlessness to, just kind of go with it, learn stuff, but also kind of listen to where things have been and being able to kind of bounce between both and kind of communicate between both will be really valuable because I only see it getting faster.
Yeah, I'm going to echo David and Kristen is in our field, because climate change is happening constantly and it's impacting the communities with the least amount of resources worse and longest and the quickest. We So in the Office of Sustainability, we constantly talk to other Office of Sustainability all over the United States and Canada. And like 5 years ago, it was sort of made a decision that we're going to focus on three things. That's climate mitigation, climate adaptation, and equity. And since then, that's all we've been talking about. So what's going to happen next? I think that on steroids, right? Because now as populations shift, in Austin, we get an average of 186 people move here every day. Like, how do we start to understand what's going on with the communities, the least amount of resources, when there's all this growth pressure on top of climate pressures, on top of, gentrification and those issues. And now with people experiencing homelessness, it is overwhelming. And I think for us, just trying to keep up and try to make life bearable is such a challenge. So for me, I think what's on the horizon is actually mental health, right? Because all the people we're working to make their lives better are suffering, and they're just trying to get by. And at the same time, you have, other underlying mental health issues. And I think that's sort of always in the background, but it's something we're going to have to start talking about more and more in the future. I don't know if mental health in sort of data, NASA is really connected, but I think it has to be.
And Mark, to your point, so the city of Phoenix is in the search process for its first ever head of a new office of heat response and mitigation, and a NASA Earth scientist would seem to be a competitive applicant for that position, right? Somebody who knows heat and how it works in the city and can work with data sets. But boy, I think the person who can speak a little of that game and can speak a mental health and homelessness game is going to really stand out in the applicant pool there. Or a demographer who understands gentrification, right? Like what a additionally interesting angle into that position that is also very compelling. And I hope this isn't discouraging, right? I mean, now I think one could leave this conversation like, man, I have to be an expert at everything. And as we heard earlier, like we gotta know how to find answers and sort of understand where we fit in and what we bring to the table, and how we can go find the other things to bring to the table as well. But I will reiterate before that I think having some engagement with equity, justice, diversity topics beyond a superficial level, it feels like it must be a differentiator over the next 5-10 years.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And to sort of dovetail off what David said, in our office, we're about 10 people, and every single person has a totally different background. Either a different passion, a different degree, a different culture, but all of us have to think about equity. So the point there is equity is going to be and has to be part of the conversation. But what you bring to the table is your uniqueness and what skills you have. And those skills could be in data analysis, it could be in mapping, it could be a lot of different things. But if you're part of a diverse team, you bring those expertise to the table. So always look for opportunities that aren't always in where you think it's going to be. It might be somewhere else. I know I've said this before, but it's really important.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Unfortunately, we are a bit over time, so going to have to end the conversation at this point. But yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much again for everyone to take the time to come and speak with everyone today. I know I personally learned a lot from this, and I don't think there's a single person on the call that didn't get anything out of it. All of the answers were super insightful, and it was great hearing from such a wide breadth of different.
Cecil, thanks for organizing, and what great attendance as well.
Thank you, Cecil.
Sure. Feel free to stick around for the rest of our events if your schedule permits. All right. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce the next set of presenters for today's session. Shobhana Gupta, Emily Gelbart, Trista Brophy, and Sativa Crews. So they'll be presenting on prizes and challenges to advanced innovation in earth science, applied sciences. So Shobhana, you can go ahead and share your screen now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cecile. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, can hear you fine.
Great. Okay, just give me 1 second and I will pull up my slides. Just a reminder, I apologize. I'm actually traveling and I don't have great internet connection, so my video is going to be off. But I am going to present my screen. If you do have any questions or can't hear anything, please let me know. I'm going to try my best to make sure that that's not an issue. Okay. Do you see my screen okay?
Yes, I do. Looks great. Coming in clear.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you again for the introduction. I'm really excited to join my colleagues, Emily Gelbart, Trista Brophy, and Sativa Crews, who are going to give you a little taste of the types of prizes and challenges that we are working on here in the Earth Science Applied Sciences program. But this conversation, we're just going to give you a brief overview of what prizes and challenges are. Give you those examples and invite you to help develop the competitions and participate in these competitions with us. So as you are learning this week, Earth Science Applied Sciences program, our primary goal is to discover and demonstrate innovative and practical uses of Earth observations. So we work in a lot of different areas, including health and air quality, food security, disasters, ecological forecasting, capacity building, and water resources. And we work not only with a lot of different scientists, but also end users, people who are actually managers and decision makers in these different fields, who can use our Earth observations and integrate the insights from these Earth observations into the decisions that they're making. We work with them to formulate new applications, to integrate them into their existing processes, and eventually transition the applications from a research and prototype and testing phase into sustained use directly by these offices. So in our program, there's actually a lot of opportunity to work across disciplinary boundaries. And one of the challenges is, how do you keep up? You heard about this a little bit in the previous panel. How do you keep up with the advancements in technology and the way science is conducted that are accelerating at, an exponential speed? How do you keep up with these technologies? How do you make sure that the right people who can help advance our knowledge and our practices are at the table making the decisions? How can we make sure that the smartest and the most creative minds from different backgrounds and disciplines are all together to solve tough problems with us? And so one of the ways that we do this is through prizes and challenges, soliciting solutions from the crowd. So most of you may be familiar with the more traditional way that science and applications are done, which is through the grant process. So this is teams or individuals apply, they submit sort of an idea of what their project would be. They make a case for why this project would be important, why their experiments would be important, and how the results would be useful. And then those are reviewed, and agencies then grant them money and say, okay, now you have 5 years or 3 years or 1 year. Do your work and show us your results. Prizes and challenges sort of flip that model on their head. And they instead start with a very focused problem statement that an organization releases. They say, this is the problem we want you to solve. And then they look at people do the work, they submit their solutions. Those solutions, the completed work, those are reviewed, and then the winning solutions out of these competitively obtained options are then selected. And those selections are things that meet a certain level of criteria, such as, they have to be meeting whatever requirements and desirements, we call them, that the question proposers have identified in the very beginning. This mechanism allows us to stimulate innovation and can be used to really get lots of different types of inputs back into the agency. For example, actual data products, services, new ideas, and content, informational content and knowledge content. The idea of prizes and competitions is actually not new for the United States. NASA has been using it for a few decades, but this goes all the way back to the inception of our country. So back in 1770, when Washington, D.C. was established as the permanent national capital of the United States, the city actually was being planned by then Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson, and he proposed conducting a design contest to recruit ideas for various buildings in DC, like the Capitol and the President's House. And so on March 14th, 1792, commissioners of the federal buildings actually announced a prize competition where they offered $500, which was a big deal, and or a medal that was equal to that value to the person whose plan was selected to be the president's house. And then in July of 1792, a neoclassical building style that was designed by James Hoban, who was an Irish-born architect from Charleston, South Carolina, was selected as the winner to build the residence of the President of the United States. And if you actually visit DC, you will see that this building is still standing today. So this is a really neat example, I think, because it highlights some of the best parts about having a prize competition. Prizes and competitions are about the pursuit of excellence. They're not looking for the best result that a specific organization or a specific person can produce, but they're looking for the best result, period. And that's because you're increasing the number of people and the diversity of individuals and organizations that are addressing that particular problem. You also have the opportunity to advance the current thinking and capabilities because you're encouraging people from outside the normal disciplines that you work with to participate in your competitions. So you get a wide variety of perspectives, a wide variety of original ideas and operational solutions to your question. It also stimulates private sector development. You know, there's already a market for whatever solution that people are looking for identified. So somebody has described a need that then the private sector can address. And then also, in a way, it minimizes risks for the agency because instead of saying, here's the money, we hope that you do the work that we want you to, it's only paying for results that work for the actual agency. So bringing us from the past, now we're going to jump into the current and the future. And we're going to have Emily Gelbart and Trista Brophy and Sativa Crews, who are going to be talking about 3 prizes and challenges in the Applied Sciences program. So thank you so much. And Emily, take it away.
Thank you, Shobana. I hope everybody can hear me properly. My name is Emily Gelbart, and today I'll be discussing the harmful algal blooms algorithm prize competition. Slide, please. So have you ever seen water change to a blue-green or dark red color? It can look really pretty, but these changes in color may be signaling a cyanobacteria or algae bloom. These blooms can be toxic and are referred to as harmful algal blooms, or HABs. HABs are when there's a rapid growth in algal colonies, which can negatively impact both human and aquatic health. In situ or in-person monitoring can provide an accurate concentration and species of cyanobacteria present, identifying whether the algae are harmful. But remote sensing and satellite imagery can provide more frequent monitoring of cyanobacteria blooms, supporting those in situ measurements. So it is very crucial that water quality managers can respond faster to HABs, since rising water temperatures and pollution due to climate change are increasing the frequency of these blooms. Slide, please. To address the issue of HABs, NASA has developed the Harmful Algal Blooms Algorithm Prize Competition. Through this competition, we hope to enhance the abilities of remote sensing to identify HABs in smaller and inland water bodies. This prize competition is unique in that it welcomes innovation from data scientists on an environmental issue. We will be asking participants to develop a cloud processing, system-based algorithm solution that can analyze both high spatial and temporal resolution data for cyanobacteria blooms in smaller and inland water bodies. We currently have data products developed that can identify blooms in larger water bodies through remote sensing, but we need that higher resolution data to identify blooms in smaller water bodies. Slide, please. Machine learning is how we aim to enhance our data sets and challenge our participants. Machine learning is a subfield of artificial intelligence that helps to process data through statistical and mathematical models. So figure 3 on the slide is an example of machine learning. An input is given to the machine to identify, in this case, it's a car. People then can extract specific features to help inform and facilitate learning for the machine on what it should be looking for when classifying that input. The machine will then classify the input based on the extracted features and produce an output. In this example, it should identify whether or not the input was truly a car. This is what the algorithms developed for the prize competition aim to accomplish. We're going to take in situ data, that in-person data, and label satellite imagery to show where a bloom has or has not occurred, as you can see in figure 4, which is right under figure 3. A positive detection of a bloom is highlighted in yellow, and no bloom detected is highlighted in red. These established points create a diverse data set, which will be given to participants to develop their algorithm with. These algorithms should be able to accurately classify and detect patterns for HABs within the given data set. We hope these algorithms can be applied to regions that frequently suffer from HABs. Slide, please. Developing this prize competition has been challenging because we are actually attempting to convert that quantitative data from in situ measurements to that satellite imagery. So we've conducted some workshops and developed a classification scheme to help convert that in situ data to the satellite imagery. Our classification scheme is listed in table 1 on the slide. We want participants to understand what qualifies as a detection of a cyanobacteria bloom when developing their algorithm. This classification scheme aims to show the difference between land and water, as well as the severity of a bloom when we're in that water. Soon, we're going to be holding annotation workshops where we will be labeling our imagery based on the classification scheme and data that we've collected. We're still working very hard on this, but if you are interested, the competition will be announced soon. So please keep a lookout on the prizes and challenges page on the NASA Applied Sciences website for updates and the official start date of the competition. On the slide, there is a link, and I believe I can put it into the chat as well if you're interested. All right, that link is in the chat. But HABs is a very serious issue that we hope to be able to handle in a more effective manner, and we'll be hoping to accomplish that through this competition. So thank you so much for your time. And if you have any further questions or concerns, or if you just want to know more about the project, please feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you so much, Emily. All right, up next is Trista Brophy.
Thank you, Shobana, and great job, Emily. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Trista Brophy, and I'm a doctoral student studying interdisciplinary ecology and urban planning at the University of Florida. Today, I'm going to share with you a little bit about a prize competition to design an innovative training product that will integrate Earth observations into decision-making. Next slide. Through this project, we want to leverage the benefits of game-based learning, which offers really rich, interactive experiences that can mimic real-world situations and invite collaborative problem-solving from participants. This project sits at the nexus of multiple sectors, including environmental, cultural, social, and economic. So harnessing interdisciplinary knowledge of various participants in the development and competition stages allows us to leverage more creative ideas. The prize competition complements current activities with innovations in education practices and technology. Next slide. We are applying lessons from design thinking in this project to ensure that we design the right thing and that we design it right. Human-centered design is a creative approach to problem solving, and it is a process that starts with the people you're designing with and ends with new solutions that are purpose-built to suit their needs. We are currently in the phase of design the right thing, shown here in dark blue. First, we want to ensure that we have appropriate insights into the problem from various perspectives, particularly for 3 key stakeholders, which includes NASA as data products and service providers, potential end users of the training product itself, and serious game developers. This information will help us define the scope of the training product. And the box along the timeline indicates where we currently are in our process, which is conducting user interviews and identifying decision points where NASA data might be able to make the greatest impact. Next slide. We are working with stakeholders in the Hampton Roads, Virginia area to develop our training product criteria that will be used to guide the prize competition. The end product will help users in Hampton Roads apply insights from NASA's Earth observations when planning disaster risk reduction and community resilience actions. Because there are broad applications for Earth observations, we need to find out what kinds of issues the community is facing, what their data needs are, et cetera, so we can move to the next phase of designing the prize competition correctly. So some of the questions we're asking our stakeholders through interviews are what key issues they're addressing, especially as this relates to natural hazards, disasters, risk, and resilience. We're asking what types of data they're currently using to inform their decisions, if they're already using NASA data, and if so, how they might be integrating that with other sources. We're trying to find out who actually needs to be trained, who might be accessing and applying insights from NASA Earth observations. And finally, what resources the stakeholders might have to dedicate like time or ability to purchase or license a commercial training product. Next slide. After our interviews are complete, we will be able to define a focused problem and move on to the prize competition, which is highlighted here in green and bounded in the box along the timeline at the top. In phase 1 of the prize competition, seen in dark green, participants will be invited to develop game and other interactive or immersive product designs. The top several designs will be selected for further prototyping. Phase 2, seen here in light green, is focused on testing and refinement of those selected prototypes. So the selected project teams will collaborate with end users to get real-time feedback on their product, and a final winning product will be selected and shared with the pilot study community. The results and the lessons learned from this will be shared with the scientific community at large, and the project is going to be repeated with a new community. Next slide. We encourage you to join us for this prize competition as well as other challenges. Though we do not have this particular prize competition live yet because we're still developing it, you can check out the Applied Sciences website for notices about this and other opportunities to get involved. Next slide. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for attending. I am incredibly excited to be working on this project and happy to discuss it outside of the Applied Sciences Week. So please reach out with any questions or just to chat about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Trista. All right, closing us out here is Sativa Crews. Sativa, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Shawena. Great job, Trista. Hello, everyone. My name is Sativa Crews, and I'm a Diversity, Equity, Inclusivity, and Accessibility intern with the Applied Sciences program. I currently study hydrology at the New Mexico Institute of Mining and Technology, and today I'm going to share about a project I am working on, using Earth observations to address environmental injustice, the International Space Apps Challenge. Slide, please. The International Space Apps Challenge is an opportunity for communities around the world to propose solutions to real-world problems. The challenge, or what we call a hackathon, is for people of diverse backgrounds, including coders, scientists, designers, storytellers, you name it, who have come together to engage with NASA data to address Earth and space challenges. Slide, please. This year, for one of the challenges called Space for Change, we are asking participants to identify disproportionate environmental burdens in their community or beyond, and to design implementable solutions for equitable outcomes. We also refer to this challenge as our Environmental Justice Challenge. Slide, please. Environmental justice, or environmental injustice rather, is about communities that face disproportionate environmental burden. Oftentimes, these communities are marginalized based on socioeconomic status, gender, race, and/or cultural background. Environmental injustice examples include severe impacts due to extreme environmental events, such as hurricanes and droughts, which are only becoming more common with a changing climate. The disastrous impacts of Hurricane Katrina, Irma, Maria, Harvey are just some examples known to negatively impact communities marginalized based on race and ethnicity and communities of lower socioeconomic status. It can also be inequality in access to resources. For example, communities in Salinas Grandes, Argentina, and Atacama, Chile, indigenous communities have been experiencing environmental stress due to decades of extensive lithium mining. Water availability has been threatened by large volumes of water allocated to lithium extraction and processing from foreign mining projects. In both regions, indigenous communities have been calling for greater involvement in resource management related decision-making. Another example is proximity to environmental hazards. These can include, but aren't limited to, poor air quality, water and soil pollution, urban areas with excessive exposure to heat, and living near areas with emissions of hazardous and toxic substances. Slide, please. So we understand that environmental justice as a term may not directly translate as we interact with the international community. We do know that environmental issues and equities exist, and they may look different depending on the context. As part of my internship, I wrote a resource article which includes examples of environmental injustice and ways that NASA data has been used to address global environmental challenges. This is a resource participants can refer back to as they address the challenge. Slide, please. Advancing environmental justice is more than just a purely science challenge. Environmental justice is complex, and it crosses into environmental sciences, social sciences, political sciences, and beyond. The Space Apps Challenge is uniquely positioned to propose solutions that could realistically work. By harnessing the power and creativity of diverse interdisciplinary teams, holistic, effective, and impactful solutions are possible. To further support teams in the challenge, we have included additional links to resources like NASA's Socioeconomic Data and Application Center, or CDAC, and the Environmental Protection Agency's Environmental Justice Mapping Tool. Pictured here are a few others listed as well. Slide, please. So now that you know about Space Apps, here's how you can make a difference. Get involved, become part of the Space Apps community, and participate in the upcoming hackathon. It is entirely virtual and will take place on October 2nd through 3rd. The challenges are not online yet, but they will be soon, and you can register at www.spaceappschallenge.org. I'll make sure to include that in the chat as well. Thank you for your time and your attention. We look forward to your participation and support of the International Space Apps Challenge. Slide, please. And my contact information is there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Cecil, that concludes our presentation, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I don't know if we have time for any questions, but I'll let you drive that decision.
Yeah, we are running slightly behind, but I think a few minutes won't hurt anyone. So yeah, for the audience, do we have any questions at this moment in time? And if not, we can move on to the next event. Please ask your question either in the chat or by using the raise hand function. Just give it a little bit more time in case anyone has any last-minute burning questions. Well, there's a question from Haley Pippin, and she asks, are these challenges open to anyone?
Yes, for the most part, they are. For some of the challenges where NASA gives away money as an incentive or a prize, There are certain requirements that the money can only be awarded to a US based person or organization. However, anyone can participate in the competition. The Space Apps Challenge, however, is a global competition, and so you are most definitely invited to participate from any part of the world. There are a few there might be a few exceptions that are listed on the website, but overall it's a global hackathon. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Well,
Thank
if
you.
that's the only question, then I guess we can move on to our next set of speakers. So Shobana, Emily, Trista, and Sativa, thank you all so much for taking the time to chat with us today. And our next set of speakers in this session will be Ella Haugen, Monica Nemo, and Hannah Wetzel. And they will be talking to us about the NASA Capacity Building Program's Earth Observation Summer Camp. So whoever's in control of the slides, you may start sharing now or whenever ready.
Alrighty. Awesome, thank you so much. So I'll go ahead and get us started. So hi everyone, thank you so much for joining. We're so excited to share the work that the Capacity Building Program Summer Intern Team has done to engage with youth at Groundwork USA. My name is Ella and I'm a student at Bowdoin College studying Earth and Oceanographic Science and Psychology.
Hello, my name is Monica, and I'm currently pursuing my second bachelor's degree in mathematics at CSU Long Beach.
And hi, I'm Hannah, and I'm a student at Virginia Tech studying environmental science.
So NASA's engagement with Groundwork USA didn't begin this summer, so we're going to begin with a brief overview of the capacity building program, what Groundwork is, their partnership, and along with the work that we, the interns, have been focused on since last fall. Next slide, please. I'm not seeing the next slide, so I don't know if my internet's being slow or if... Okay, there we go. The capacity building program specifically developed has partnered with Groundwork to employ NASA's Earth and climate resources to address environmental and public policy issues. For those of you who aren't aware, the capacity building program, which operates within the Applied Sciences program at NASA, works to make Earth science data accessible to all, and develop one of the programs within the capacity building program does this by fostering the next generation of scientific leaders and Earth observation users. Groundwork USA is a national network that works to transform the environment of low-resource communities, which aligns with the capacity building program's interests. Working with NASA remote sensing data, Develop helped Groundwork create a methodology for evaluating land surface temperature and risk of flooding for participating cities. Next slide, please. While the primary audience of the capacity building program is working and early career professionals, the program has recently explored ways of engaging youth by collaborating with Groundwork, which has a big focus on youth development. Beginning in the fall of 2020, the capacity building program intern team began an exploration of different methods for building capacity in Groundwork USA's Green Teams, which is a youth development program for 14 to 18-year-olds, by giving virtual trainings to youth located at trusts across the country. So we've now given 3 trainings, and while we employ different approaches for each, they all have the same foundation. They're designed to help youth better understand their environment and to empower them to pursue careers in STEM-related fields. Training content focuses on understanding what Earth observing data is, where it can be accessed, and how it is useful to build resilience in urban environments that are disproportionately impacted by climate change. All the trainings use short, eye-catching YouTube videos, as you can see on the left, along with short Google Forms to assess learning. Those are the core components of the trainings that we've kept the same across the terms, but we've also been working to update and improve each training we give using feedback from students and continuous research on the most effective virtual training approaches. Next slide. So last fall, we focused on microlearning, meaning we delivered all the content in bite-sized, easy to digest pieces. The training had the asynchronous components I mentioned on the previous slide, such as YouTube videos and short Google form assessments, but it also had live meetings where youth could engage with each other and ask us questions about the training. On the left, you see the agenda we sent out prior to the training that summarizes the format and the content. In the middle, there are 2 PDFs that contain links to all the assignments and live meetings that we sent at the beginning of each of the 2 weeks of the training. As you can see, we split it up into introductions and overviews of the content in week 1, and then the students use that knowledge that they gained during week 1 to dive deeper into specific case studies in week 2. Next slide. When we got to work in the spring, we updated the language and the design we used in hopes that it would draw more kids in, and we reformatted the training to describe it as a scavenger hunt. It was once again a 2-week-long immersive experience, but this time everything was on one PDF, which you see on the right. The students were directed through this PDF to various websites, videos, activities, and articles, and instructed to bring back specific information from those external sources to fill out a Google form. The flyer we sent out for kids to sign up for the training is on the left. And another change that we made was that the training was entirely asynchronous and self-paced in order to accommodate more schedules and time zones. Next slide, please.
So now we will talk more about how we built upon our past trainings to develop our current summer training for this term. Next slide, please. Our goal for this summer training was to improve our past trainings by providing youth at participating groundwork trusts the ability to communicate with us more often, gamify the process through competition, conduct the training for 3 weeks instead of 2 weeks, create new assignments that allowed students to collect their own data, and include live sessions to increase engagement. We focused heavily on teaching and providing the students with the resources to learn more about Earth observation and remote sensing, while also providing an element of mentorship on our part as interns to provide resources and advice regarding professional and academic development. Next slide, please. We used Google Sites to deliver the content because it allowed us to manage assignments and tasks with ease. This helped us combine gamification, communication, and competition elements into our training, and led us describing the training as a virtual summer camp. As you can see, this also gave us the freedom to design and format the website with a greater user interface for us and also the students participating in the training as well. We organize all of the assignments and live meetings using a calendar and clickable icons on the homepage. The students were also able to chat with each other by clicking on the chat button, and there was also a game board that showed their individual progress compared to their peers completing the training, which allowed for both collaboration and competition. Next slide, please. We used a storyboard and a syllabus to help us plan how each week and days within each week would look. This allowed us to design the training with ease, and we also sent it to the groundwork trust coordinators so that they could be familiar with the content and make sure the content would also be beneficial and helpful for the students. As you can see, we split up the training into asynchronous and synchronous components, and we also split up the content with the first 2 weeks focused on information gathering and the last week focused on applying what was learned. Next slide, please.
So after developing the trainings, we were able to implement it by communicating with students and by creating different activities for them to work through. As we mentioned, communication was emphasized during the trainings. Throughout the 3 weeks, we used 3 different forms of communication with the students. Each week, we would have live meetings using Teams where we went over activities the students should be working on. Here, students would be able to engage with us and ask any questions they had. If you look at the image below, you can see one of our meetings where we played Kahoot with the students. We also used Outlook to email students 2 to 3 times a week to remind them of meeting times and provide them with any additional information they needed. Lastly, we used Google Chats for more informal conversations where students were also assigned teams with one of our interns as a counselor that they could chat with. This allowed them to introduce themselves and ask questions in smaller groups. So this summer, we introduced 2 new components to the training. The first was the data collection portion. So we created 3 data collection activities because we wanted the students to collect their own data and get real hands-on experience. And all students completed a canopy cover activity where they made their own densiometer to collect their data. Then students had the option of completing a cloud cover activity or a surface temperature one, depending on whether they had an infrared thermometer. After students completed their 2 activities, we had them reflect on their observations, answer questions, and paste images in a Jamboard with their trusts, which created a collage of findings. The second new item was our Kwl Reflective Essay. We added this component to get the students to reflect more on what they already know, the K, what they want to know, the W, and what they learned, the L. They completed the first 2 parts, the K and the W, at the beginning of the training, and the last part, the L, at the end of the training. This essay was important because it allowed students to really digest what they learned and gave us feedback on what we could add in the future. After the training was complete, we had a few more pieces to implement, which have helped lead to many positive outcomes. So after students finished their training, we gave them NASA certificates of completion and a post-training questionnaire. We wanted to give them a certificate to motivate them to complete the trainings and allow them to show that they did a training with NASA. We got the students' feedback using the questionnaire, which is crucial for future trainings to ensure that the work this capacity building program does with groundwork or with youth in general can be improved upon. It also gave us insight to see what the students enjoyed or did not enjoy about the trainings. This endeavor has been mutually beneficial to Groundwork USA and NASA. The capacity building program has expanded its reach to youth that would not otherwise have access to these resources, thus furthering its diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts by getting more minorities aware of the capacity building program. The trainings have supported Groundwork USA's mission to grow the next generation of environmental leaders. Looking ahead, this has created the potential for further collaboration with Groundwork and created a foundation for creating virtual training targeted at youth, which could be applied to other organizations in the future.
Thank you for listening to our presentation, and we hope you have learned more about our project and how we have expanded the groundwork training which started last fall of 2020. We appreciate you taking the time to be here. So with that being said, raise your hand or ask in the chat if you have any questions or comments. Thank you again.
Fantastic presentation and super interesting initiative that y'all have been working on. So thanks for sharing. And yeah, do we have any questions at this time?
Hi, this is Nancy. Can I ask a quick one?
Of course, Nancy.
Thank you. Great work. Great to see all the improvements. One, I'm curious to know if you saw an increase in the number of participants. And 2, I just would be interested to hear kind of one thing that they gave you as positive feedback and one thing they gave you, like which part they liked the best, and then what thing they gave you to think about for further improvement. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Nancy, for the question. So we definitely saw participation increase over the terms. Last fall, we very much viewed it as a beta test, our first training. So I think we only had 2 or 3 students who were participating. This past spring, we got it up to like 7 to 10. But this summer, we worked more personally with the trust coordinators, and they helped us put out flyers and get the registration out to students. And we actually, they had to make it a competition for students to be able to take the training because we didn't have the bandwidth to accommodate all the students who wanted to take it. So this summer we had about 20 students who were taking the training. And I'd say in terms of things that we're improving, I think the biggest thing over the course of all the terms that's been a really big learning curve for us has been the communication aspect. That's something that we always get really good constructive criticism from the students taking the training on, and just figuring out what platforms to best use, whether to do live meetings, all kind of, we found kind of depends on the group of students, and it's something that could definitely continue to be workshopped upon in the future. And something that we've always gotten really good positive feedback about is the actual training content and the design of the training, and the the kids always find it really exciting to be learning about NASA and learning about satellites and the way that we found great success in the way that we've phrased those things. And so we haven't had to change much about our design and content of the training because of that. But Monica and Hannah, if you want to add anything, feel free. Thanks for your question, Nancy.
Yeah, thanks. Great work. Always exciting. And apologies, I got to run to the next meeting, but I'm glad I was able to come. Take care. See you soon. Bye.
Of course. All right. Any other questions at this time? If not, then thank you again, Ella, Monica, and Hannah for presenting. And I'll go ahead and pass it off to the next set of presenters. So joining us next are Haley Pippin, Erica Carcelin, Alexa Lopez, and Brittany Beaudry, and they will be presenting on behalf of NASA Develop about modernizing collaboration with version control systems. So geoinformatics team, go ahead and take it away, please.
Awesome. Thank you, Cecil. Hello, everybody. We are NASA Develop's Geoinformatics team. My name is Haley Pippin, and I'm the Senior Fellow for the Geoinformatics team, and I'm based out of the Ames Research Center. And today I am joined by Brittany Beaudry, the Fellow at the Ames Research Center, Erica Carcelin, the Fellow at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and Alexa Lopez, our Assistant Geoinformatics Fellow based out of the Arizona node. I also wanted to mention Scott Cunningham, the Fellow at the Colorado node, who was unable to join us to present today, but is the final part of the geoinformatics team and contributed to this presentation. So for those of you who may not be familiar with geoinformatics, the Geo team at Develop serves as a point of contact for all of our project teams, GIS, remote sensing, and scripting related needs. And we also create tutorials, run trainings, and provide resources to the participants so that they can build their technical capacity during the term. And today we're looking forward to speaking to you all about how we have worked to modernize coding collaboration at Develop using version control systems over the past year. So in its essence, collaborative coding is all about tackling complex research problems as a team and expressing the solutions to those problems with code. I think that we can all agree that there's no one formulaic way to approach a research question, particularly one that requires code, and that it takes multiple perspectives to arrive at the best solution. The problem then becomes, how do multiple people collaborate on one script when the script is only housed on one computer? The answer to that is with version control systems. These are tools that allow teams to manage the changes that they make to their code over time, and they also allow multiple people to contribute to one shared code base, similar to how you would collaborate on SharePoint or on Google Drive. Recently, Develop has expanded its use of version control systems in an attempt to help our participants better collaborate on the technical side of their projects, especially in this virtual environment. I'll pass it over to Brittany now to expand on what those systems are.
One of our main goals here at Develop is to share the code and tools that we've created during our projects throughout the term. To do this, Develop created an account on GitHub in March 2016 as a way to share project code more efficiently with both partners and the public in general. GitHub is a place to store and share code on a global scale. So our GitHub account, we post all developed codes that have completed software release, plus they're tagged by topic so that those looking to learn more about a specific application area can see what solutions Develop has to offer. Currently, we have code from 44 separate projects available for exploration, and they have been forked or made into a copy for personal use over 230 times. Our top coding languages are Python, JavaScript, R, and MATLAB, but we're always looking for more ways to build capacity and reach more people and organizations with our work. With all that being said, let's look a bit deeper into how we've developed our tools in a virtual environment. Here at Develop, we launched our internal GitLab site in October 2020 as a way to share unreleased project code more efficiently between Develop teams and across the program. Similar to GitHub, GitLab is a web-based Git repository meaning that we have the entire internal repository of Develop's released and unreleased codes available to current participants throughout their term. This way, teams can explore and make use of past developed code while working collaboratively on their own tools. By utilizing our GitHub site, or GitLab site, as a program-wide version control system, it's enhanced our ability to troubleshoot errors and help teams when they run into coding issues. Additionally, we use GitLab as a way to store coding tutorials for developed participants, so the place for learning and coding is one and the same. Our GitLab site is still completing beta testing, but over the past year, it's been an invaluable resource here at Develop for tracking code and making better use of the good code that we already have. And with that, I'll pass it over to Alexa to tell us about how Develop has encouraged the reuse of effective code within the program.
Thanks, Brittany. So we wanted to share with you one of the many case studies done that highlight the importance of collaborative coding at Develop and how we're able to leverage this to create a larger impact on our projects. So during the spring of 2020, the Arizona node took on a project to identify areas of priority for cooling initiatives in the city of Philadelphia. The project involved driving a list of environmental and socioeconomic variables that can identify which neighborhoods would be most susceptible to hazardous heat. Code was developed in Google Earth Engine and in RStudio to create a heat vulnerability index to provide the city of Philadelphia with the tools necessary to make informed, data-driven decisions on heat mitigation within their city. In the fall of 2020, Maricopa County worked with Develop to conduct a similar study in the city of Tempe, Arizona. Since the team already had a great set of code to work with, they were able to add a new component to the workflow, and that was a Lidar shade analysis. And this was done for neighborhoods in the city of Tempe felt had low tree canopy coverage and high socioeconomic vulnerability. The data was used to map out the estimated amount of relief at local bus stops and neighborhoods to improve the transportation conditions for residents within the city. In the spring of 2021, the Office of Sustainability in Austin, Texas worked with Develop to conduct their own urban heat study. Since the team had refined code to begin with, the participants were able to take additional time researching environmental indices to further customize the index to be specific to the Central Texas metropolitan area. The team was able to provide a more effective index for the city of Austin, one that was tailored to the geographic location, which would not have been possible without the contributions of the Philadelphia and Tempe teams. The use of collaborative coding through Git and Google Earth Engine allows Develop participants to take their projects to a more complex and locally adapted way because we're not starting from scratch. Develop truly shows the benefits that are provided through the phrase standing on the shoulders of giants. We've come so far because of the developers before us and through collaborative coding and an environment that encourages sharing. Because of this, effective and measurable impact can be achieved time and time again. And now I'm going to hand it over to Erica to talk about the future goals for the Geo team at Develop.
Thanks, Alexa. So the first thing that we really want to do is encourage the reuse of code, and more importantly, the improvement of code term after term of Develop. We've seen past examples of Develop projects where they create useful and novel products and tools within just a 10-week term. And a lot of that time is spent troubleshooting, bug fixing, and even creating a graphical user interface. If future projects can utilize the existing frameworks of past code, they can essentially skip that preliminary troubleshooting stage and get right into implementing new features and functionality. Then project after project, code will keep building off of each other and overall quality will improve over time. We also want to encourage teams to use GitLab during the term when they're working on projects in Google Earth Engine. Right now, Earth Engine is not particularly collaboration friendly. And if you've worked on a team project in it before, you'll know that version control can get pretty messy, especially as more people are trying to work on the same script. A workflow within GitLab would not only make collaboration easier and more efficient, but all of the documentation created along the way would make reproducibility that much easier for future projects. And then lastly, beyond the benefits of version control and code reuse that we've already mentioned, there's a huge opportunity for capacity building for our participants. Going through the process of reusing and version controlling your code will present plenty of skill building opportunities for our participants. So this would include reading and interpreting other people's code, using organization and documentation best practices to make sure your own code is reproducible, practice skills like branching and merging, and then ideally learns industry standards for formatting and reuse, as well as citing within your code. Now that we have this overall vision, we do have some goals that will indicate how we're incorporating GitLab into the develop program. First, we'd like to see past project code get regularly reused. So as more past code is evaluated, more snippets, functionality, and general inspiration from past products will become routine and regular steps within the workflow of future projects. There's so much to be learned from past projects, and the importance of looking back really can't be overstated. Then secondly, we want to see that a majority of code-heavy projects are utilizing GitLab for version control and collaboration during the term, and then ultimately actually submit their projects at the end of the term for software release through GitLab. And then our final benchmark will be to see our public GitHub getting more traffic and attention. And we'd really love to see that these high quality codes that we're producing from the program start getting regularly utilized and then even cited in projects outside the program. And that's it for our presentation. Thank you so much for listening to us today. We're really excited about this initiative and would like to thank these individuals for all of their support in kind of this process that we've gone through so far. We'd be happy to take any questions at this time, as well as Haley will be putting our geoinformatics email in the chat. So if you have any follow-up, we'd be happy to answer over email as well.
All right, thank you so much, everyone who just presented. And yeah, with that, do we have any questions for Develop's geoinformatics team? We are at the end of the day, so you can feel free to either put it in chat or just go ahead and speak up. All right. Well, it's been a long day of earth science and applied science related content for everybody. So with that, I think that draws today's afternoon plenary to a close. Thank you everyone in the audience for attending, and thank you again to our speakers for speaking. And I wanted to just plug that the Earth Science Applications Week is ongoing throughout the week. So if you want even more content and getting able to hear insights both into the professional development and innovation side, as well as the more earth science and earth observations related projects side, there are a number of plenary sessions happening tomorrow at the same links as today, and also the afternoon symposia are both, again, happening concurrently tomorrow. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending. And with that, we can draw today's meeting to a close. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Cecil.
Thanks, Cecil.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you.